Okay, so today I'm joined by Taylor. Nice to have you on the podcast.
Lovely to be here, and thank you for the invite, Karl. I'm excited to get to talk.
How are you? You okay?
Yeah, super well today. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
How are you?
Whereabouts are you?
I am in Los Angeles at the moment, my city of birth, my favorite city on the planet.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that sounds. It's one of my favourite places. The weather seems to be always beautiful.
Amen. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad to say the least.
So we've come here today to talk about having more energy at work. Exploring that subject. But firstly, I want to get to know you a bit better, and I'm sure the listeners do. So where was you born?
I was born in Los Angeles, California. I think the West Coast is the best coast. I love this place. I've spent most of my life here.
And who are or were your parents?
Oh, so my mom was a professional tennis player. She was ranked seventh in the world actually at one point. She's an
Wow.
inspiration for me. Yeah, she's a high achieving and very competitive person. As I've learned a lot from her. And my dad, he owned and operated a furniture and interior design business with his family. It was known as the Kreiss collection. They did very well for themselves. They had over 20 stores around the U.S. and I can confidently say without bias that I like their furniture. It's good stuff. Yeah. I
Um,
also have a stepdad that, yeah, I actually don't usually talk about this, but it might be a point of interest for later on or just for listeners that his name is Kirk Kokorian. A really interesting guy, dropped out of high school in eighth grade and became an entrepreneur and ended up one of the richer men on the planet. He was actually a multi-billionaire at one point. Uh,
I mean, like, there's not many people that have well, I suppose there's more now, but that have dropped out of education and become a multi-billionaire.
Yeah, I'd say he's a case study and a half. Really driven guy, somebody who had incredible street smarts and a real bias towards action. He was always making moves to improve his station in life, and apparently made a lot of the right decisions. Really interesting guy.
And when did he come into your life, just out of interest?
Very young. So my parents had actually gotten divorced when I was around two, and Kirk showed up on the scene not long after. So he was, very much a father figure to me, and I absorbed as much information about good living as I could from the guy. I think it's probably had a profound philosophical impact on the way I view happiness and success.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles for the most part, but my family we were a nomadic bunch. I've also lived in Florida and in Pennsylvania and in New York and in Las Vegas and also in Thailand for a short period.
That sounds a very crazy upbringing. So, what? Talk to me about your education. Where was that, and what did that look like?
Sure, yeah, with pleasure. So I got my bachelor's degree in philosophy from UCLA. Go Bruins. And then I moved on to get my master's in positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. Go Quakers. Yeah.
And why did you make them choices?
Well, so I actually played tennis at a pretty high level, sort of a natural thing considering my mom. I was born with a racket in my hand, and UCLA recruited me for their tennis team. And also my two cousins went to UCLA. My dad and my two uncles went to UCLA. It's a bit of a family tradition and just a wonderful place, an incredible institution that I think isn't just obsessed with achievement. It actually places a lot of emphasis on character development, and I couldn't have been much happier to end up there. Yeah, but philosophy was my area of study there, and then several years later, still meandering around looking for my purpose in life, I was lucky enough to discover positive psychology, and it turns out the hub for positive psychology in all the world is at the University of Pennsylvania, and so I threw some of my worldly possessions in my car and drove 2,800 miles from LA to Philly and did everything I could to make it work over there.
Yeah. So what about you just said something there that's really stuck out of everything that you said,
Mm.
which was that you found your purpose in positive psychology. So how did you find that?
Yeah, oh, this is fun self-reflection. I appreciate the question. Well, so, for as long as I can remember, I've always had a pretty strong existential bend. I'm always concerned with questions of identity, meaning, purpose, and what a person can do with their short time on this planet to feel like they lived well. And because of that, I always gravitated towards philosophy, and I think it was really helpful, but I reached the conclusion that just sitting in a chair all day thinking probably wasn't the best way to answer all of these highfalutin questions. And so years later, I was lucky enough to have a friend tell me about the Third World Conference for Positive Psychology in Los Angeles. I attended, and I immediately recognized all the people there as being of my own substance. We all had the same questions, we had the same drives, and just the idea of an empirically based science directed at how to live a good life seemed like exactly what I needed to do. And as I progressed further into the culture and got into school and worked at the Positive Psychology Center, there was just a resonance. It was very clear to me. And I feel very fortunate to have found that life path because I can personally report a high degree of job satisfaction.
No, that makes sense. So where are you today? What does your life look like right now?
Having finished up my time in my master's program and wrapped up my position as the director of special projects at the Positive Psychology Center, I was liberated again to choose where I wanted to go. And I just missed Los Angeles. All of my best friends and family and some of my favorite hikes, it's just my environments in general is in LA. So I made my way back out here, and nowadays I'm building my own positive psychology coaching and consulting business. I help individuals one-on-one, and I help organizations to use positive psychology to really achieve any desired goal. But normally it's to bring in a higher degree of well-being, find happiness, find a sense of meaning and purpose, and the wonderful part that actually tends to raise the amount of money that people make too. So yeah, I'm applying positive psychology in the real world, and on top of that, I podcast, I write, I give talks, all in the same space basically. Just to give you an idea of what's going on literally right now, I just finished an article for the High Performance Institute, which is Brendan Bouchard's new blogging platform. I'm really excited about that. It's going to come up at the end of the month, and I wrote about burnout and how to combat that in the workplace.
Well, that's a great part to turn on to our subject, I suppose. Just on that,
Nice.
it sounds like a great article and something that we can certainly reflect on with what you say, what we're going to talk about in terms of having more energy and avoiding that burnout in the workplace, because it's something that I've seen people experience. I've probably experienced without really knowing it. And I'm sure you have as well, even though you seem like you've found your purpose a lot earlier, and we're going to talk about that a bit more. But why is burnout and having energy in the workplace such an important topic for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why are we even talking about this, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because I was getting really excited for this interview, and I just happened to be on Twitter, and I saw a tweet that I thought was hilarious, honestly, but also spoke to why this topic is important. I'll read that right now if that's okay. It says,
Yeah, go ahead.
it says, being an adult is pretty easy. You just feel tired all the time and tell people about how tired you are, and they tell you how tired they are. And it's, it's funny in that it's a bit absurd, but I think it also resonates pretty heavily with people as just plain being true. More recent surveys are suggesting that we're reaching over 50% burnout rates across industries, and it's actually become more normal than not to just feel exhausted and disillusioned and demotivated at work constantly. We're at a point where we just
Yes.
accept that and expect it to be the case, and I think we'd all agree that it shouldn't be. We want to be healthy and energetic so we can reach our optimal levels of happiness and achievement, and so we need to be doing something about this burnout epidemic and find a way to generate a little more energy at work.
So why should people be concerned with gaining more energy at work. Surely, you know, a lot of people would think, well, I do enough at work, and I get what I want out of it. But why should people be more concerned with it?
So I guess I think the answer is somewhat intuitive in nature. If we're wanting to do our best work and advance our careers and really to contribute to the world in some meaningful way, that requires the skillful management of our energy levels. You know, a metaphor I really like is that we need enough fuel in our spacecraft if we want to fly to the moon. There's
Hmm.
a lot of desire to realize our purpose on this planet, and that's not the kind of thing that we can achieve optimally unless we're paying attention to our energy levels and forming rituals around trying to get good energy hygiene.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting way of putting it. I like the one that a manager that I used to work under said about, you know, everyone needs to be on the same ship, and you know, you need to be able to know where the ship's going, because that will give you better productivity, better performance, and obviously them sort of subjects all result from everyone working towards the same direction with the most amount of energy.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies go, right, this is the direction we're going in, without one, providing any leadership, and two, providing the tools to be able to be productive and be energetic with it. So all we end up doing is working to our bone without getting any quality out of the work. And I always find that, you know, that is a big pain that I see in the workplace, especially here in the UK. I don't know if it's any different in the US. Maybe you can share a bit more on that, about what you see in the workplace.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say that I see a lot of the same. I think that we're working off of a moded paradigm at this point. You know, we had the Industrial Revolution, and that was supposed to make our lives much easier and give us a wealth of physical material products that would make it so we had more leisure time, and and more stuff around. But the technological revolution came through and really changed the way that we do work nowadays. You know, it's less about being on a production line and physical activity or creating products, and more about an economy of mental energy. You know, we're after innovation. We want creativity. That's really what drives success in our technologically infused modern workplace. But I don't see us really shifting away from the industrial production model. You know, we're still just kind of thinking you just got to keep hammering at something and you'll get more of it. It's just about input of energy and you'll get output. And that's not optimizing or custom fitting for the how, you know, even just our biology works. Like, the human brain only has so much energy in it, and if you just sit around and work yourself to the bone all day, you'll get diminishing returns on the quality of your output. And I think we need to start a discussion around our obsession with hyper productivity, you know, in America, and it sounds like over the pond as well. If we want to not only do better but just be happier, I thought that was kind of the goal of living overall.
So you just touched on something, technology,
Mm.
and there's been so many pros with the introduction and use of technology, but there's also a lot of cons. And one of them is, for me, is there is a lot of information out there, and obviously we've had stuff like fake news, especially you guys have in
Oh
America
my God,
with
yes.
the election. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions about becoming energetic at work?
Um, so general misconceptions about energy at work. I think there are many, you know, just to lay that out flat. I think it's a pretty complex issue, and we could probably spend the entirety of our podcast discussing these misconceptions. If I had to pick out at least one, I'd say, you know, many people think that they can just neglect good energy hygiene. Many individuals think they can be sleeping 5 hours a night and eating unhealthfully, not exercising, and they can just wake up and make up for all that with like 5 cups of coffee. When that is really just not how it works. You know, that's just taxing our adrenal glands. We're not properly revitalizing. It's kind of like putting your car into fifth gear and just running it indefinitely. You know, if I don't
Mm.
turn my car off to allow it to recuperate, if I don't change the oil, if I don't, engage in some kind of basic maintenance of the machine, it's going to crap out and it's not going to be doing what it's supposed to be doing. So yeah, I mean, like I've identified that as what I think to be one of the primary misconceptions is just that we don't think about practicing self-care. We just neglect that aspect when it's really foundational in our ability to do our best work and achieve success.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Red Bull could say they've made a company out of people not understanding the way the body works.
For sure, yeah, well put. I'm totally guilty of it too. I love the taste of those things. I wish they made a decaffeinated one, honestly, so I could be drinking them all the time. But that's definitely speaking to a big part of the issue. You know, it's people wake up and they think that they need to get real amped in order to be productive, and they are for a little while in like this kind of manic state of getting things done, and then you just crash like mountain to valley and totally neutralize your ability to be effective the rest of the day. I fully agree.
So what are some unconventional strategies for gaining more energy at work?
Geez, I love the unconventional ones. I feel like we're all pretty aware of the fact that we should be sleeping more, or eating right, exercising, those sorts of things. You know, it's not a mystery. It's not like a big secret. But I love the unconventional methods, say, like finding meaning in your work. It's been
Yes.
demonstrated over and over again to provide a positive energy boost. People who find meaning at work they achieve higher degrees of job satisfaction, of intrinsic motivation. They're more engaged, and they achieve better well-being. I have a bit of a spiel about meaning at work if you'd want to hear it.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, cool, very nice. So yeah, I had read recently a researcher by the name of Tom Rath, who is a hero of mine. He had surveyed over 10,000 people and found that only 20% of them felt that they were doing meaningful work on a daily basis, which is woefully low. You know, it's really a rich area for potential intervention for people who are looking to improve the quality of their life and gain more energy at work. You know, I think just a big part of the problem, it's not so much that there is no meaning to our work, it's that we're not good at recognizing it, and that
Yes.
meaning is, creating meaning is like an active process. I know at times when I'm like sitting hammering away at an Excel sheet, I can't help but like just sigh deeply and shield my eyes, and it's just like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? It's so pointless. It's mundane, But if you engage in something we call cognitive reframing, kind of, if you start to think about it a little differently and dig into it, that Excel sheet is likely an activity that is leading towards contributing to some person in the world. You know, it's a step towards offering a valuable service or answering some important need for real people that their lives will be improved by what you're doing. And if you stop to dig into that and really appreciate it, there's a palpable difference in the texture of your experience. You know, I bartended for a while, and sometimes you sit there and you're just like, why am I making drinks? Like, there's no great purpose or meaning in crafting a gin and tonic. It's kind of a ridiculous thing. What am I doing with my time? But when I started reading this research and I started applying this technique in my own life, I would sit and I'd just write really quickly that this drink and this service of hospitality is actually providing a much needed rest and opportunity to socialize and vent for people who had a really hard day at work. And when I made that transition in my mind, really just sort of as a thought practice, I noticed that there was more spring in my step. You know, I had more gusto. I was nicer to my clients, and in return, they were nicer to me. And it creates these positive upward spirals that I think, you don't hear about this technique too often, but it's a really valuable one. For anybody who thinks this sounds appealing to them, I just recommend stopping at like 3 preset times during the day and looking at what you're doing and trying to write very quickly about how it's going to add to the life of another person. And studies suggest that you'll find a positive energy boost.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. I think that's a real. It's really made me think for sure. You know, about different stuff, because we all have stuff in our lives we just don't like doing. And everyone's always said to me, you know, you have to go and love what you do,
Hmm.
and I think that can be difficult at times. And I think you're exactly right. If you can reframe your mindset in terms of looking at it a different way, that okay, I've got to do this now, but where will it lead me to? What will be the end result? And I think that's so important. And you mentioned doing Excel sheets,
Hmm.
which I would say probably the majority would not want to be doing.
Yes.
But what are the other energy drains around our workplace?
Yeah. I mean, there can be a lot of them. You know, I guess one that my mind just kind of pops in is the idea of flow disruption. I don't know how familiar the audience is with the concept of flow, but it's a very well researched construct in positive psychology. It's that state you enter when you are doing something that you find truly engaging. You are absolutely absorbed by the activity. You lose your sense of time. You lose your sense of self. You turn off that overly critical voice in your head, and it's incredibly rewarding. It's considered to be like a peak experience. It's a great way to be creative and innovate and get really good work done. Uh, There's a thing though where it takes some time to get into flow. I'm sure you know what I mean. If
Mm.
you're sitting and you're writing an article, it doesn't just all flow immediately. It takes some time to like keep the research in mind and gather your intentions about how you'll be writing the article and so on and so forth. And in the workplace, it's probably right when you're about to get into flow that like somebody comes up and knocks on your door and like
Yes.
right or like an email notification pops up on your phone and it's like a fire that needs to be put out immediately. There's a just an endless stream of flow disruptors in the workplace in general, and that becomes a serious energy drain. When you're really trying to get an energy boost from finding flow and you keep having to deal with issues from the outside world, it's demotivating. But something I might suggest actually is if people are trying to adjust their situation around flow disruption, you might consider like closing the door to your office and putting a post-it on there just saying I'll be out in 45 minutes. Or I love the auto response emails that you can set up where if people are sending you emails, you can have one sent automatically in return that says I'm in deep work right now, but I will be looking at my email in 2 hours and I'll respond to you then. That usually clears some space around the workplace so that you can get your flow on, so to speak.
Yeah, so we're constantly trying to maintain what we're doing. So how do we, or what do you recommend to help us manage our energy levels better?
There are so many concrete strategies, and they're, I think, highly individual in nature. Where one person doesn't get enough sleep, it's probably better for them to be working on sleep. You know what I mean? Where another person is specifically having issues around eating too much junk food, that's probably the best area for them to try and work on. But I think as far as like concrete strategies, I would say forming positive rituals. Like start off by identifying your areas that you need help in and do your research, your due diligence, and then really start to implement these daily rituals that intervene and get you more of what you want. I'm ranting a little bit here, but so like for a person who doesn't sleep well, like myself,
Yes.
creating a positive ritual around sleep is probably one of the best things that I have done, and hopefully I will continue to do. Where research says being on electronics late into the night really messes with your ability to fall asleep. There's something about the light rays or the sort that trigger your brain in the way that you feel like the sun is out, so it becomes hard to go to sleep. One of my positive rituals is an hour before I want to go to sleep, I stop watching TV, I turn off my computer, I put my phone on silent, and I'll just read, or I'll engage in heavy breathing, deep, calming breathing. Those are the kinds of positive rituals that I think we should develop a greater degree of intentionality around, and like those are the sorts of things that will help us manage our energy levels more effectively. It's different for everybody. I guess if I were to try and prescribe like at least like a meta strategy, I would say to start collecting a lot of data. That's really very helpful in general. That which gets measured gets managed is a popular quote.
Mm.
I mean, there's even been some experimental studies where if you just give someone a step tracker, they on average will start to walk like an extra mile a day. You know, there's just a lot to be said for actually collecting the information because it keeps us conscious of it. It keeps it top of mind so that we're not just monitoring, we're actually starting to make little improvements here or there, which is also a great motivator and leads to better habits.
Yeah, something that I tried, and again, I was very similar to you in terms of that my sleep pattern wasn't great.
Mm.
I'd wake up just as tired as much as I went to sleep feeling like. But I think for for me, something I found that worked was off a hero of mine, Tim
Oh
Ferriss.
yeah.
When I listened to his podcast, he he said that he used vinegar, apple cider vinegar to be exact, and honey in a drink about 30 minutes to an hour before he goes to bed.
Mm.
And I tried the same, and I now do not wake up at all during my sleep, and I'm able to go to sleep normally around about 11:15. So I've got into a really good pattern, 11:15 p.m., and wake up at about 5:45.
Wow.
So 6.5 hours sleep every time, and I wake up dead on my alarm at 5:45 and go to sleep at 11:15,
That's
and
wonderful.
it's really worked.
Yeah. I'm such a fan of Tim Ferriss. I think that at the base of a lot of what he's doing is just this idea of life experimentation where
Yes.
yeah, you get an idea of what's going on with yourself. Perhaps you're collecting data. Maybe you notice that you're eating too much sugar and it's causing energy crashes, or you're not sleeping enough, or you're not exercising. And then just trying some new strategy, like one or two a week, and seeing how those strategies work for you. That's perhaps it's apple cider vinegar and honey that helps you to get to sleep, and you've identified something that improves the quality of your life. I think it's at the base of always moving towards like continually refining our well-being is you just gotta try new things. You gotta see where you're at. You gotta take notice of spots that could be improved, do some research, find some strategies, try them out. And I think that's how we get better and we grow personally.
Yes, I certainly agree with that. So one thing that always has stood out with me um, is I find people contagious, and that's the same with energy. I think that if if I see people and I'm surrounded by energetic people, I always become energetic myself. And it's no matter how tired I am, I could have had no sleep, but if there's people that are very, loads of energy, I just find that really contagious. So how important are your co-workers, the people you surround yourself? How important are they?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'd say, Karl, that I find you to be positively contagious. And thank you. I feel energized when I'm talking to you,
Thank
man. It's
you.
very much the case. Yeah, I think it's not even necessary to cite any broad longitudinal research studies. It's intuitively correct, and our evolutionary past has hardwired human beings for hypersociality. We have very deep needs to connect with other people, and we tend to take on the behaviors and thoughts and emotions of those around us. Personal development guru, I think it was Jim Rohn, had said that you're basically the average of the five people you spend the most time around, and
Yes.
I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. I have one stat here I found interesting, just because it's astounding. It says if you have a friend who smokes, you become 61% more likely to start smoking. And it works even through networks. It may not even be your friend, but if your friend has a friend who smokes, you transitively become 29% more likely to smoke. Um, it's like all of the studies surrounding the importance of our social groups are really astounding. It's pretty incredible the effect the people around us have. And
Mm.
I think actually I wrote in that Burnout article, I think I gave 3 strategies for combating burnout, and editing your social group was number 2 on there. I think it's vital. If we want to be high achieving, energetic, optimistic people, then it becomes essential to curate our social group. I think it's helpful even just to bust out a piece of paper and write down 6 or 7 people you spend the most time around during the day at work, and address if they tend to be a positive energy charge or an energy drain. And when you have that information, if you can just form some concrete strategies to spend more time with energizers and less with the energy drains, then you're really doing a lot of good work for yourself. I think that's a wonderful strategy.
So you just mentioned high performance, and there seems to be a strong link between people having energy
Mm-hmm.
and their engagement, and then how that links to performance. And obviously within an organization, you've mentioned it before, that is about making money. So how does people's energy and them being engaged actually link to making more money?
Yeah, you can sort of, just by reasoning, identify that there's a causal effect here where, people who didn't get enough sleep the night before, maybe they were out drinking and they've got a hangover, they tend not to be as engaged, right? It's difficult just to sit in your chair, let alone actually put the entirety of your attention into writing an article or something like that. So energy is sort of essential to engagement for sure. And engagement has become a really hot topic in positive organizational scholarship nowadays because it seems to be one of the top predictors of performance, of how much money people are making at the end of the day. If you have, let's say, a bunch of telemarketers and one of them is truly engaged and trying to communicate more effectively and they're fully present and they're putting everything they have into it, they're more likely to make the sale or to get whatever donation they were after, and that raises the bottom line. Whereas if people are lacking in engagement, then obviously the person on the other side of the phone, you kind of sense that, and it doesn't have the same effect. I mean, I have an interesting study. I'm hoping this is on point enough, but there's a professor at Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania by the name of Adam Grant. He's a brilliant guy. He's like a national bestseller and just really nice. But he did an experimental study where he went into a bunch of telemarketing firms, and it was the job of these people to get donations to send kids to college. Yeah? And
Yes.
yeah, and what he did is he let one group, he just left them alone. He didn't do anything with them. He looked at the numbers they were getting and at one point and then later on. But with the secondary group, what he did is he brought in actual college students who were able to go to school because of these telemarketers' efforts. And just 5 minutes of speaking with these kids led to, I'm trying to remember exact numbers or percentages, but yeah, it was something like they were probably getting $150 a week, and it went up to around like $500 a week and stayed that way for a month or so. So, I mean, like, I found that to be astounding, first and foremost. It's so nice to hear that we can actually bring some positivity into the workplace and that would help us make more money. Wow, it's like so cool. But it's really neat because, it doesn't take a stretch of the imagination to see how these people, just seeing how they had contributed positively to the lives of these children, they felt more engaged with what they were doing. They were finding a greater sense of meaning, and that engagement actually translated into making significantly more money. And there's a great principle there that I think we can all apply to our daily lives at work, and that organizations can use in a way to make more money, but also to make their employees happier, which is just a magical combo.
Certainly, and I think you just showed great leadership there, because it was sort of proactive in that circumstance to sort of see that and sort of show that there is more that the leader can do in terms of that responsibility by bringing in an emotional motivation.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses seem to rely on a financial motivation, which will not work for everyone. And I always find that if there's that, intrinsic motivator, that's always a lot more, well, it has a lot better and a lot stronger result, especially for the long term. So how important, and you might be able to give me some examples of different leadership techniques that has resulted in a greater energy for their staff?
Yeah, I just finished an article on mindful leadership. So I've been doing a little bit of work in this area. There's some interesting studies too that, there's always so many though that it's hard to catch one out of the ether and, and remember it. But I know, for instance, that leaders who focus on the character strengths of their constituents and not just like what they're doing wrong tend to increase their constituency's engagement. I'm pretty sure it was like twice over. It's like by 200%, maybe even 300. The idea of shifting from our old model of just like beating up on people when they do wrong and telling them they need to improve in this area, and generally, approaching with a fear leadership style really doesn't seem to be as effective as bringing some positive energy in with identifying how people are doing really well. Of course, you don't want to neglect what they could use some work on, but the idea of a leader stopping to say, hey, Jim, that was a really creative solution you just came up with. Or, Martha, I think you just expressed a great deal of kindness when you made a point of helping Jim with that memo or something like that. The leaders who approach from a character strengths perspective and are more empathetic and compassionate and are willing to tell people how they're doing things correctly seems to provide a great positive energy charge and drives engagement, and that's all the kind of stuff that will usually provide more money at the end of the day also.
Yes, I always find that leaders struggle to understand the importance of their employees taking a break, because they instantly feel that if they're not at their desk or they're not working, then they're not making the money.
Right.
So,
Oh, yes.
How important are breaks? Let's use an example, is a 5-minute break, would you say, going to produce better return for the company, a better investment? How long would these breaks need to be?
Okay, yeah. Well, firstly, I think breaks are essential. I think they're very, very important. Regular breaks for mental tasks have been shown to increase creativity and productivity reliably. It kind of harkens back to what we were discussing earlier with the industrial model, like paradigm, versus the now technological, where, yeah, like, if somebody wasn't on the line adding their part to some product that's being put out, you're losing money for sure. But when the task is more mental in nature or involves innovation, the human mind is not something that can just keep going. What'll happen is you get diminishing returns, and the quality will go down. You may actually get collateral damage at the end. Somebody's so exhausted that they're not filling things out correctly, or they email it to the wrong person. It can become a serious issue. And one of the best ways to combat that is to stop and take a break. Studies of highly productive and successful people suggest that it can be helpful to work in specifically 45-minute sprints with 15-minute breaks. That seems to come up over and over again in the literature, and of course it's different for everybody. Some people can probably go for longer, or some need to back off a little bit. But the model that seems really effective is 45 minutes of really intensely focused, purpose-driven work, where you're all in and you're doing as much as you can with total focus. And then you need to give the brain, some time to revitalize, and that can take about 15 minutes, from my understanding. And in that time, you can get up and be a little active. That always provides a boost of positive energy. Get a stretch, do some deep breathing, and relax the nervous system. It seems a better way to work than just telling everyone in the office to keep working and they better not get up for a bathroom break.
Now, I got asked this question the other day, and I did not know what to say. So you may not even, someone of your expertise may not even be able to answer this. Yeah. But what if, let's use an example, we're in a call center, and there are KPIs on the board of what they need to target, how many calls they need to be making, how many leads that needs to be turning into, and you're against everyone else, and your boss won't let you take a break, and you've got to be there for 6 hours. What can you do in that situation to boost your energy?
Oh, that's brutal.
Tough question.
Yeah. I mean, the question, I'm happy to engage in this one with you. I love exploring space like this, but yeah, just in general, I might first consider just getting a new job if possible. I think that our bosses can be some of our greatest doctors, so to speak. They could really help us to flourish physically and mentally. They can be great drivers of our success, or they can just be tyrannical jerks that are hurting our well-being and their own chances for success at the end of the day. So first, I'd sort of say like you might might consider just getting into a different organization or something. But it's very true, of course, that we don't always have control over our duties and responsibilities. We can't. People rely on us. People need things from us. We can't just shirk everybody and say I'm going for an hour yoga class in the middle of the day. It's totally understandable. There are, however, acts of what I might call mini resilience or like micro resilience. They're just even small things that we can do to help us revitalize and buffer ourselves against stress and give ourselves more positive energy. I mean, this could be any number of things, and it's best to find what works best for you. But there's a lot of research showing that sitting tends to really drain our energy. It's a weird thing, but apparently sitting for more than 20 minutes at a time, it neutralizes the effects of even like 20 minutes of exercise. It's really not good for our bodies to sit so often, and it starts to drain us. So standing at your table, we're seeing a lot of like standing desks nowadays. That's partly because of this movement. It would look funny, but you could even do some jumping jacks or burpees. Physical activity is definitely been shown to be a positive energy boost and helps to stimulate the mind. Some mindful stretching is always great. I think I mentioned that a moment ago, just to loosen up the body and calm the nervous system so you're approaching your situation a little more centered. Mindful breathing techniques. I have one if you want to hear about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yes.
So this is a mindful exercise, a mindful breathing exercise that is super quick, but has a tendency to really calm down and center yourself and your nervous system, so that you can be a little more relaxed in these high stress environments. And the lovely thing is that it's always available to you. It's not that you need to take an hour off or go take a break, because we don't always have that opportunity. But the exercise was given to me by mindfulness expert Corey Muscara, and he suggested it to many different types of people, from school children to high-powered business executives, and he's always received incredibly positive feedback, and I have too, since I've been handing out this exercise to my coaching clients. I will read you the instructions now, and Karl, if you want to join me, maybe we can do it at the same time.
Yeah, I'm up for that.
Okay, cool. So you're going to start by taking out your left hand and holding it out in front of you like you're holding a pizza. Then you're going to take your right pointer finger and rest it at the base of your open palm, right near your wrist. Yeah?
Okay.
Cool.
Yes.
And what we're going to do is we're going to slide the right pointer finger up our thumb, inhaling through our nose as we do it. And we're going to exhale slowly while we slide the finger back down to the base of our palm. So we'll start out by doing that, yeah? So we'll breathe in.
Yes.
Very nice. And we're trying to align our inhales and exhales with our sliding of our right pointer finger up our left palm. And once you've done your thumb, you're going to breathe in and move up the pointer finger of your left hand. Very nice. And we repeat. We slide up the middle finger, inhaling fully. Quite nice, quite nice. And we'll go to the next finger, inhaling, syncing the movement of our finger with our inhalation. And then exhaling, moving the finger back down to the base of the palm. And one last time, up the pinky. Very cool. Well, congratulations to us and to anyone out there listening and tried that out. You just took 5. I have to acknowledge that it feels a little silly at first. You're like sitting there like petting your hand. But just the deliberateness of sitting and taking some very deep, long breaths has a tendency to generate feelings of serenity. And that's really been shown over and over again. Breathing exercises are, as old as there are cultures. And there's a reason for that. It's because they work. And this one in particular, like, I've done this before. I had to give a public speech or, a podcast episode or something if I feel my nerves getting a hold of me. And it really centers me and gives me a moment to relax my nervous system in a way that is very quick and effective. And yeah, where your boss might say you can't take a break, maybe try taking 5. And, if he's not looking, take 10 or 15.
Well, you said that you may feel silly in that situation, but I do something a bit more stranger, let's say.
What is it?
Another one of my heroes is Tony Robbins. I know we've
Yeah.
spoke about him before, and he does a technique where he does basically the shoulder press above his head, where he just literally, and again, it's another breathing technique. As he pushes up with his arms to fully extend, he breathes in, and as he comes back down, he breathes out, and he does that very quickly to increase the heart rate and get blood going around the system, which will improve your energy.
Yeah.
And I've done that a few times. I don't tend to do it in public, as you can imagine.
Sure.
But I've certainly done it in the toilets at the workplace or when no one else is looking, just to make sure that I'm alert and I'm ready to go and full of energy, because I know that I'm dealing with another client or another, a person that I'm meeting. And it's really important that I have that energy and have that enthusiasm to make sure I'm meeting their needs. And that is a simple technique that I use. I also use the app, which is an American app called Headspace.
Oh, yes. It's great.
For meditation. So do you use any other meditation techniques?
Yeah, first of all, I love that exercise. I'm going to start using that myself. I just did it, and I feel more powerful.
Yes.
It falls in line with a lot of research from Amy Cuddy on like body posture and how just adapting a more of a powerful, like open, successful, achievement-oriented posture can actually make you feel more confident. There's some science to back all that for sure. As far as my own meditation practice, I have been pretty bad about it recently, I gotta tell the truth. But when I was in Thailand, I used to meditate for an hour a day, and that was for 3 months. And I can confidently say it was some of the more relaxed I'd ever been. I felt like it gave me a better sense of my identity. It helped me to put the kibosh on some habits that were less than productive. There's just an avalanche of research on how positively effective mindfulness practices can be. Myself, like, what I like to do most is just to adapt an intentional and non-judgmental awareness of my present experience. I have ADHD, so just sitting and paying attention to my breath starts to drive me a little crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, which is kind of the point. You're developing. It's an attention training exercise to some extent. So it's good if you're feeling bored. That's kind of like the difficulty of it, but it also provides a lot of benefits. But for me, what I like to do is just it's called open monitoring meditation, where you sit and you just pay attention and see like what thoughts pop into your head or what sensations you're feeling in your body, what emotional state you're in, and you don't judge them harshly and you don't get attached to them. You just sort of notice it and you go, oh, that's interesting, and you let it go, and you go back to listening to what's going on with yourself. And it's a better way for me to go about it with my ADHD tendencies, I found, because it allows my mind to wander, which is what it does naturally, but in a more intentional way, and the non-judgment is important. It's also, that style of meditation has been associated with improved creativity, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that certainly is interesting. That's certainly an aspect of meditation that I've never really thought of, because I wouldn't exactly label myself as creative. I think I am in a slightly different way to maybe what everyone associates a term with. But I certainly wouldn't say that was a reason that I would use meditation. I use meditation because it releases stress,
Yeah, for sure.
and that's what I find that I come out the other side feeling more relaxed, feeling re-energized, and feeling confident. And I think they're the three benefits that I find. But I suppose, like most of the things we're talking about today, it's about what works for you.
Yes, totally.
And I think that's the key point to get out of what we're talking about. So just on that, about what works for you, what works for you in terms of eating? Because food and drink is where the majority of our energy will be produced from. So what do you do to improve your energy levels?
Yeah, I'm laughing a little bit just because I remember right before we started talking, I said I'm a bourbon guy. So a lot of alcohol and cigarettes and Doritos. No, so I was an obese kid. I was a big little one, and around the age of 13, when I became more vain and wanted to impress girls, I started doing a fair amount of research into nutrition, and that's followed me through life. It's become more than just a point of vanity. It's something that helps me a lot with my energy levels, and with optimizing my performance. I should say that I'm not a nutrition expert or anything like that. I never got a degree in it, but I do my own research, and I took some classes in school. And we're learning about how we should be eating nowadays, and that does change all the time, but something that seems pretty stable is that we should be avoiding sugars. Just pure sugar it's toxic to our cells. It's actually like
Yes.
a candy for cancer. Energetically, we get these huge spikes of energy, and we're like manic for a second, but then we just crash and we become useless the rest of the day. And that's really something to avoid, is these massive spikes and falls in our blood sugar. So avoiding sugar, is a good option. It's really something I'd recommend just as a starting point. And that transfers over also into carbohydrates. I avoid sugar almost entirely, but I also dodge simple and even a lot of complex carbohydrates.
Yes.
Simple carbs, they're almost like sugar. It doesn't require a lot of work to get the energy out, and you get these spikes in your blood sugar level. The more complex the carb, the better, where it gives you more reliable and steady levels of energy throughout the day. Personally, I really like legumes for that purpose. Lentils, black beans, they have so much fiber in them that they fill you up, and they're extremely complex, so they provide energy without like the huge jumps and falls. I mean, honestly, I'm basically on Tim Ferriss's 4-hour body diet. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It sounds like we're both Tim Ferriss
Yes.
fans. Yeah, that's basically the way that I go. But general principles: more vegetables, more complex carbohydrates. Protein, like meats, are actually generally pretty good as far as macronutrients go. They don't have so many calories as fat, but they fill you up and they help with muscle synthesis, which is nice. So, for a personal recommendation, I might check out Tim Ferriss's slow carb diet. It's done a lot of good for me, but at the end of the day, I would again say that it's about what works for you. So, start a food journal for a week or two, get an idea of what you are eating and what effect that's having on your energy levels, and then try and make adjustments. Healthy ones, ideally, less sugar, less simple carbs, more vegetables, more complex carbohydrates. And if you're a carnivore, I do tend to eat a fair amount of meat because of the weightlifting that I do. It's very helpful in that respect. I think that there's a lot of individual differences in this space, and that the only way to really figure out what works for you is to try something. Get a nutrition plan of some kind and try it for a couple weeks and record if it's working for you. And if it is, keep it up. And if it's not, dump it and find something else.
Yeah, that's certainly a good mantra. So I really like people watching, and
Me too.
I often go into the workplace and look around and see people snacking mid-morning, mid-afternoon, between meals, and I know some people call this mindless eating.
Sure.
But what's your thoughts on, snacking, especially a lot of sugary food seem to appear. So I know what you're going to say about that.
Yeah, you do. Funny. So you were asking earlier about some of the energy drains around the office. I actually think that's one of the big
Mm.
ones I neglected to mention is that, if there's a communal kitchen and if they offer any kind of food for free, it's rarely something that's got real nutritional value. It's like candy and bullcrap that's not going to be helping very much. So the idea of like walking into a kitchen like that and snacking all day on sugar and on stuff that's going to make you crash pretty quickly, I would say steer away from. But I personally do a fair amount of snacking. I am one of those people who likes to eat a lot of small meals throughout the day. But I'm always trying to gear them towards what am I about to put in my mouth and how is that going to either be a positive energy source or start to detract from my energy. And that leads me to eat more things like almonds. Nuts are great sources of energy that don't
Mm.
spike your blood sugar levels. I love seaweed. It's kind of salty. It's delicious and it's got a nice
I
crunch.
love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's great. Sometimes the wasabi kind, always good. Um, edamame, just snacks that like if you develop a greater degree of intentionality around your snacking, then I think it can be fine. It can actually be beneficial if that works for you. But it's the mindless eating that you said that I really love that term is what gets you in trouble. It's I see candy bars, so I eat candy bar kind of thing. There's not a lot. There's no space there for you to stop and consider what you're about to eat and the effects that will have on you. We need to recognize when we're triggered by these like sugary, delicious snacks and try and make a more deliberate and better choice for ourselves to eat things that are better sources of energy, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you there. So let's just break into productivity because we've talked about being mindful, being free.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about leaders within the workplace, but something we haven't talked about too much is the layout of a room. I find really interesting
Oh yeah.
because we've seen a lot of modern, what I class as modern companies, I suppose, startups are very prominent with this, with table tennis tables, open plan rooms.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different techniques, and again, like anything, there's a lot of writing about this. Many publications are out there about what's best. What have you found that's worked, and why is the layout of a room so important?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So it spurs me towards some comments from a management guru who's on the cutting edge. His name is David Burkus. We actually did an
Mm.
episode of the psychology podcast with him. If anyone cares to go listen to it, it's full of information of this kind. Shameless plug right there. Sorry.
I love that.
Okay, very good. Yeah, no, just casual drop there. Yeah, so what he said is he'd found that these open concept plans for the work environment has actually caused people to miss work more often. That's something they're finding, which is interesting. I think he said that maybe
Mm.
people are getting each other sick or something because they're in closer proximity, or maybe people just can't stand being in a in a giant room full of people all the time. Whatever it is, it's not like the panacea answer that Silicon Valley is seems to think it is. What I have heard is probably the best design for an office space to get productivity, engagement, and all those good things up is to have a wide variance of different kinds of spaces within it. So, for extroverts, they might be the kinds of people who love to be in the big room around a lot of people, and they want to talk to the person next to them, and they want to jive and see if they can't come up with some new and interesting idea. That's what gets them excited, and that's what gets them moving. For someone like myself, who's probably a little more introverted, like I appreciate that too, of course, but I need space to myself. I need something, a desk that I might be able to close a door on so that I can sit there and really get totally absorbed in whatever I'm doing. That's how I get my best work done. And so when it comes to the layout of an office, just to be repetitive here, it seems like if you can provide many options to suit all of the different people and their different styles and even just what they feel like doing at that point in time, is probably the best way to optimize energy and innovation and creativity and all those great things we're after.
Is there any companies that you know that you think are getting this right?
Ooh. Yeah, I couldn't say off the top of my head, honestly. I'm a generalist in positive psychology. You know, people come to me and they say, this is my issue, this is what I need to know about, how do I reach this goal? And then I go perform all the research, and then I come back to them and help them, implement their strategies. But just off the top of my head, that's not an area of expertise for me, so I'll keep my mouth shut. Do you know of any?
You,
How about that? There's a good technique. I'll bounce the question
you,
back
you're
at you.
yeah, yeah. You can see that you've hosted your own podcast when you start turning it back on the person hosting.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I mean, there's a lot of different examples. You know, a space where I've I've used before is actually the British Library in London, and they have a lot of different spaces in there that will suit different people.
Cool.
And whether they did that deliberately or not, I mean, it suits a wide range audience, because they will have anything from students to elderly people who are just looking for their own space to work. You know, they will have individuals to small startups that are using it as a space. There'd be meetings going on, there'd be people working with earphones in. You know, it's a real variety of people that they would get there, and there's a lot of different spaces, from outside to inside, where you're on a table for four, suddenly you're on a table for one that's hidden on a corner. You know, there's so many different types of seating, different types of open flooring, really, where you can just find your own space and work. And I think, yes, libraries suit that more, but I do agree with you. I'm not saying that, you know, we're going to turn you into a designer for room layouts, Taylor, but I certainly feel that it's something that companies need to think about. And I have seen many different examples, I'm sure, like yourself, but I'd be interested to see what the science is and what the data is behind whether that actually has much effect.
Yeah, I mean, as would I. I mean, just the first source that pops to mind would be that episode with David Burkus. He'd recently written a book about, I think it's called like Under New Management, and he took a look at, cutting edge companies that are trying new things to be ahead of the curve and seeing what works and what doesn't. And he had some strong opinions about what you might want to consider if you're like creating the layout for your new company or something like that. Yeah, that's an exciting question, just because there's so much that we don't think about in terms of optimization. I mean, like it just would have never occurred to me to like figure that introverts would feel claustrophobic and overstimulated in an open air environment. The open structuring I always thought sounded kind of like more fun, but I ended up trying it myself, and I'm like, I'm being driven crazy here. I can't focus at all. I need to hide in a corner for a second, like Smeagol, and get my work done. But yeah, it's an exciting topic.
Yeah, and I think you just actually sort of read my next question, because I was going to say, is there a chance that we overanalyze all of this? Because we could think about the layout of the room, the people in the room, the type of leader that we're being. How can we be more productive using the technology that we have available? There's all these types of things. Are we overanalyzing it at all?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely possible to become over analytic or hyper analytic in these spaces. When I first got into nutrition, it got to be overboard. It had gotten to the extent where I was spending way too much time doing research rather than being productive in other areas of my life. I had reminders on my iPhone every couple hours reminding me to like stop and have a snack, or to like drop and do squats. I
Yeah.
became somewhat obsessed with nutritional and exercise optimization, and it was very clearly actually becoming counterproductive in a way in my life. I think when it comes to energy in the workplace, we're probably not analytic enough, at least the way that our cultures are working right now. I mean, with the idea that we have 50% burnout over industries, or that another study suggests that like 11% of people report experiencing high degrees of energy on a daily basis. It seems like we're not focused enough in this space, and it could use a little more analysis and implementation to figure out what's what we can do to help ourselves. But yeah, very very easily could cross over the golden mean and become a little crazy about all this.
Yeah, so let's get into the final part of this podcast.
Sure.
So Taylor, what are some general pieces of advice you have to help people actually implement these changes?
Yeah, okay. Behavior modification is probably one of my favorite topics. Outright, I might just recommend a book for people to get real nitty gritty. It's called Smart Change. It's by Art Markman. It's a great book on the topic. Pretty exhaustive.
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, it's a solid one. It's funny though, a lot of the times when we're like, I want to lose 10 pounds or I want to get more energy at work, the usual advice is just do it. Like, just do that. Like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make it work. And that's really not how things work. Our psychologies are not set up to just willfully self-regulate constantly. It exhausts our ability to self-regulate, and we end up just binge eating or doing something contrary to what we want. I think a top piece of advice I might give is what I just mentioned, even with setting iPhone reminders at different parts of the day, because it happens so often where we have an intention. Maybe you were listening to this podcast and you thought one of the strategies sounded cool, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that, and then you just don't.
Yes.
Right? Like, it happens to all
I've
of us
done that.
constantly. Yeah, it's funny. Because it seems like a great idea at the time and you actually want to do it, but then life happens and the idea gets pushed out of your head and it's just not there anymore. To actually implement the strategies that we want to better ourselves, we need to keep it top of mind. It needs to stay within our conscious awareness. So setting iPhone reminders or putting it in your planner, preset times during the day, stop and take 5. Or, 8 o'clock on Monday night, I'm going to batch prepare an entire week's worth of healthy food, and I'm going to, package them in Tupperware and take them to work with me every day. Like, getting very concrete about what your strategy is and why you're trying to do it, and then setting reminders to pop up during the day and continually make sure you actually do the thing is a top recommendation of mine for sure. Yeah.
And I think the way you started that point by just doing it, I think the only way I can ever recommend anyone to be successful is by just doing it, because once you explore and figure out what works for you, and that's the same in this subject, then very quickly you will be able to work out, okay, this works, this doesn't, okay, maybe if I change this, that might work. And over time, you soon work out what does work for you and how that makes you more productive. And hopefully, and it should work, you will get better results for the long term from that. And I certainly think by just doing it is the start point for anything you want to achieve.
That's awesome. Just to clarify, when I was saying that just do it is not good advice, I meant it differently. So I was saying just do it technically doesn't work. What I mean is, like,
Yes.
The idea that I want to lose 10 pounds, like, I'm just going to continually flex my willpower until that happens, kind of thing. Like, it's the idea of not setting up, like, reminders or designing your environment to help you in some way. Like, it's important to, like, remove junk food from your house. Like, you want to have strategies in place to help you
Of course.
do it. Yeah, and in the sense that you were using just do it, like, you actually have to try it. I totally agree. Fully and completely.
Yeah, definitely. There is two ways of just do it, and this is what people seem to miss out on, really, because there's the first way, which is, what we use at Naked Leader, which is the formula for guaranteed success, what this podcast is called, where you know where you want to go, you know where you are, and then it's a strategy of how to get from one of them places to your next destination.
Yeah.
And that is through action. That is through just doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And that's the one you're talking about. And then there's the second one where you've gone through that strategy, but you have to do it. There's no point, like you said, doing the work, knowing where you want to go, knowing where you are now, and then you put the strategy in place, but then you don't do it.
Yeah,
and that's what I see, because unless you find out what works for you, you're not gonna improve, and unless you actually just do it, you're not gonna go anywhere.
yeah, I can fully appreciate that, and well articulated, Carl. I like
I got there in the end, didn't I?
it.
So we always finish every podcast with 10 quick fire questions, the
Okay,
same 10 quick fire questions that I ask every guest that I've had on this podcast.
cool.
So you ready?
Yeah, fire them off.
What turns you on professionally?
Helping people.
What turns you off professionally?
Tyrannical jerk bosses.
How do you unwind?
Muay Thai, kickboxing.
What profession other than your own would you like to try?
Ooh. Uh, um, uh, wow, I'm really blanking on this one. Nothing's coming to mind. I'm pretty fixated on what I'm doing now. Is that an okay answer?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
We're going to go with that for now.
Okay.
What activity gives you the most energy?
Spending time with friends and family and my dog.
Who is your biggest inspiration?
I have a lot, but first to pop to mind just then was my mentor Scott Barry Kaufman. He changed the trajectory of my life. He's a good dude.
If you had to present a speech right now, what one word would be its subject?
Mindset.
You're at your best when you are doing what?
Helping people with philosophy and positive psychology to become healthier, happier, and higher performing.
If today was the last day of your life, what one lesson would you like to impart?
Examine your value system and where it came from, and try to determine your own, because that's the way to live most authentically.
For sure. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say is the reason he is letting you through the gates?
I acted with integrity, kindness, and compassion, and that's what it means to be a good person.
And there we go. What a great answer to finish on. So where can people find more about you and more about certainly your thoughts, and you have to give your podcast a mention as well, because you've got some great ideas and guests on there as well.
Oh, cool. An opportunity to talk about myself. It's my favorite topic. Yeah. So, if you liked any of what you heard today, thank you. And you can find more of my ideas, like my writing, on my website, which is taylorkreiss.com. If you scroll a bit, you'll find some podcast episodes I've recorded, my blog. There's a lot of articles there. There's some resources. And if you're interested in positive psychology coaching in any way, I'm based in Los Angeles, but I do Skype sessions, things like that. I also give talks and work with companies. And so I'm not the host of the Psychology Podcast. That's actually Scott Barry Kaufman. I'm the executive producer, though, and I'd worked with him for the past 3 years. He's a brilliant psychologist and a good man who has gotten to, I think, 150 episodes, all with really highly creative, intelligent, forefront kinds of thinkers, and I think it's a great show. You can find that at thepsychologypodcast.com, I believe. And I think that's it, and I would want to express a great deal of gratitude to everyone listening, and of course to you, Karl. I really appreciate your time and efforts here, man. You're doing great things.
Thank you. No, we really appreciate your time. It was an excellent episode, and great to learn off you as always. So thank you for today.
Cheers. Talk to you soon.
No problem. Thank you.